So I'm Alex Joseph. I'm the managing editor of Hue magazine at the Fashion Institute of Technology. Welcome to another installment of FIT Talks, the oral history program of FIT. Today is December 13th, 2018. It's 1:30 and I'm interviewing Judy Ellis, the founder and chair of FIT's Toy Design Program. Hi, Judy.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Just enjoying thinking back to the beginning, I guess. A little nervous, but...
Would you mind telling me, because you're the chair of the Toy Design Program, was there a toy or were there toys that you loved when you were growing up?
There was one.
Okay.
And his name was Bruno. And he lives in this office with me.
Oh.
And he was my best friend. And we went on many adventures, and here he is. And I will never go anywhere without him.
Oh, come on.
I'm not kidding. He's had, I don't know how many baths in his life. And we would go to Carl Schultz Park, and we would make discoveries, and he was my best friend.
Wow.
So he was probably my favorite toy. And whenever anyone asks me what's my favorite toy, that's what I always say. I don't talk about product on the market.
I understand.
Because we have so many wonderful products on the market, I wouldn't want to leave someone out.
Sure. How old were you when you got that bear? Do you remember?
Maybe I was 4.
4. It still looks
very
really
small.
kind of plush and soft.
Well, you can touch him.
Oh, thanks.
He's had a number of baths.
Wow.
I remember having a terrible temper tantrum, and I lived in an apartment building on 86th Street in the East Side in Manhattan. And we had these wonderful French windows, and I remember being very, 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 very upset. I don't even remember what it was about. And I threw him out the window he went into the courtyard, and I was hysterical. And my mother found me trying to crawl out of the window to go get him. And so then all the people in the building had to go down to the courtyard and find him, and he came up, and he had a special baño, and he never went out the window again. Yeah. But he's a very special... He's special because a child talks from their heart to the toy. And that's the communication. And sometimes that's hard for me to talk about because I feel that there is not enough left of that in the society that we live in. And I feel that it's incredibly important for designers to understand that that's where you talk from, is your heart. And that's why, after all of his baños, he's still with me. He was the first person who moved into this office, and I felt he was lonely, so I got him friends. And it took me a long time to find friends for him that I thought were appropriate. So he has some twin rabbits and a couple of puppets, and he's very happy over there.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
it's emotional for me.
Thank you so much for telling me that. That's so touching. I appreciate it so much. And it tells us so much about why the program feels the way it does, I think.
Well, I think that is at the heart of the program. It's like, I think one of my favorite books that I ask everyone to read is The Velveteen Rabbit. This program is very dear to me, and it came from my heart, and it will always be from that part. And the reason our alumni are so special, those that have succeeded, is that they carry that with them, and that's a gift. And that's why this program has been successful, because it doesn't come from the motivation to make money. It comes from the motivation to give back, to provide children with opportunities, to provide designers with opportunities, and in all the years, its core has never really changed, because its core is really learning how to communicate from that special place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Wow.
that's all from Bruno. Bruno gave me all that.
But Bruno is an
Yeah,
incredible
started.
toy. Maybe, so let's step back for just a second. Tell me, so you grew up on the Upper East Side, did you say?
I did.
Awesome.
I did.
And did you go to school in New York?
Yes, I was born in the city. I went to a girls' school called Brearley, and they used to say really Brearley, and and we had a school across the way called Chapin, and we were arch enemies because we were the intellectuals and they were the society people.
Oh,
And
wow.
their uniforms were green and ours were blue. Now, I actually like uniform, and if I could have a uniform, I would get up every morning and be so happy not to have to think about clothes, to tell you the truth. So, yes, so I went to that school. It was a very good school.
Oh, cool. And your family was here, obviously, in New
My
York.
family was here in New York. My father was a maritime attorney who actually came from the law firm that he worked at, where he worked in their library, helped him get through school at night.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was growing up, because he wanted to give me all of the best, every Sunday we would go down to the Lower East Side, and we would visit the movie theater that he worked in, and we would go to Katz's and have some fabulous lunch, and come back uptown, and then I would do my homework. And that was my that was my childhood.
That's great.
Yes, that was great. My mother was my mother wrote movie. She was a movie critic,
Oh, wow.
but she wasn't allowed to do that for a long time, because when I grew up, women were supposed to stay at home and take care of the house and the family and So I think that was part of my motivation in knowing, as I made my journeys through school, that I would always be independent.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Absolutely. Do you remember what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Well, I went through all different kinds of phases. First, I wanted to be an attorney because I thought that was so important. Then I wanted to be a writer, which translated into a poet, which then moved on to an artist. And that was sort of how it went. Yeah.
Okay.
It did take a little detour. I did want to be a dancer.
Oh.
And I did actually join Meredith Monk's company.
Really?
When she was just starting.
That's so cool.
She was just starting. I was at Parsons. I was a student, and I had this wonderful person who was one of my teachers, and he joined something called Group 212, which was in Woodstock, and it was commune. And I went. I took a little leave of absence from Parsons, and I went to Group 212, and I met Meredith Monk. And Meredith Monk was just starting her company, so I went to the Smithsonian and walked in the dinosaur room, and I went to Canada to the World's Fair, and it was a very good experience. And so for a short period of time, I wanted to be a choreographer.
Oh,
That was
wow.
really, I wanted to create things that were in space. But my life didn't go that way.
Oh, we were so cheated. That would have been so great.
Could have been good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But you were at Parsons.
I was at Parsons.
What were you studying?
I was studying graphic design, communication design, and then environmental design.
Okay. Which is what? That's like how museum exhibits are set up and things like that? And then did you do that professionally for some time?
Yes, for a number of years.
All right.
I worked for a company called Chermayeff and Geismar, and I worked on a bicentennial exhibit for about 3 years that's still permanent in the Smithsonian called the Nation of Nations.
Wow.
That was very fun because you got to work with the curators, and they were so excited about having their own designers. And you would go into a storeroom, and they would have all these artifacts that you would ask them to collect, and you would have someone on the floor, and you'd be way, way up on a ladder, and you'd be art directing how it should be laid out, and then someone else would be drawing what was going to happen with it, and they would. The curators would come in with their friends and sort of say, "That's my designer." This was very funny. Yeah.
Were you then living in D.C.?
No, I commuted. I mean,
Oh.
I was living in New York, but we would go down there so often that we stayed in the same hotel. And when we left, we would leave our bag in the baggage room downstairs because there was no point in and it was about 3 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And go ahead. What were you going to say? Did I interrupt you?
I did a number of other large scale installations and things like that for that firm, which was something I never thought that I would do. I don't think I've ever done anything that I thought I would do. Really. It's just not the way it's gone.
Good surprises all the way. Now, is that a skill of sketching and picturing and thinking about spatial relationships and so on and so forth? That skill?
That skill, I think, is probably why I fell in here. I think that is part of why I ended up in here. I'm not really sure, but but it could be. But it was the closest thing for me, since I cared about designing things in space and having people move through them. It was the closest thing to dance. And so I was actually very happy because when I was in school, I thought that I would be the next C.P. Pinellas, who I had as an instructor, and she adored me, and she told me, "You're going to be me." And I thought I would be doing all kinds of editorial design. And when I went to Chermayeff and Geismar, they said, "Oh, well, the first thing I did for them was a series of murals for IBM."
Wow.
And Ivan said, "This is your project." And I just kind of looked, and I thought, "Oh my goodness, this is not what I expected." But it was fine. It was always fine. And yeah, funny to think about.
That's incredible. So, how did you make the transition into teaching? Because I think you taught at Parsons, correct, for a while?
I did teach at Parsons. I worked at Chermayeff and Geismar for a number of years, and then I decided that I would start my own consulting business, which I did, and I had a number of nice projects that I did. One was for IBM. There were a lot of opportunities, but being the person that I am, I was looking for something more. And I spent a summer in an ashram.
Wow.
And I had a very meditation teacher that spoke to me. And I remember going, this is really not something that I should be telling you, but why not? I remember going to have my chart done because there was an astrologist who was really who was with my teacher and was really into all the plotting and he said to me "You're a teacher." And that was really interesting because I came back and I I want to say just several weeks after that, I received a phone call from Parsons, from my chairperson, who told me that their major instructor for communication design was taking a leave of absence, a medical leave of absence, and could I start and take his classes? And I said, oh, sure. And I said, do you have a curriculum? Just send it over, so I can see what he was doing. No, we don't have anything. Just come in and do it. So I said, okay. and I did. And that was the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the beginning.
Did you like teaching?
I love teaching. I love teaching more than anything. I love working with people. I'm much more interested in people than I am in the corporate world in many ways. Because I think if we don't have special relationships and if we don't have connections, we don't hold on to our humanity, I think that's why we're here. So, so I love teaching.
Good. And then, so how did you end up transitioning from Parsons to over to...
That was a good one, too. I was, one day, someone that I knew asked me if I would please contact FIT because they had a full-time position open in the communication design department, and that they were looking to bring someone in who could sort of update the curriculum. This is quite some time ago. Because Bill Ronan, who had started the department, who was from advertising, he had retired, and the then chair, Tom Giacconi, wanted to have someone who could really snap it up a little bit. And so they brought me in. And my first reaction was, of course, why FIT is fashion.
Yeah.
And it was explained to me that, oh no, they have all these departments. So I came over and I met Tom, and I liked Tom, and and then I had to go through the interview process. And that was quite an interesting experience. Tom had prepared me. He gave me a summer live class. So I had high school work that I had done here. I made an outline, and I did, I had this high school work. And then I had my portfolio of work that I had done in the industry, and I had my industry portfolio, and I had my student work portfolio from Parsons, and I had this high school portfolio. And I think, education is a very interesting area because it's almost more political, to be honest, than the corporate world. And it was very surprising to me, actually. I was hired because they didn't have any choice, really. I mean, my high school work was better than what they were doing in their regular classes, and but they didn't want me. They wanted to have someone who had been on, in teaching there. That's kind of the way it was in the old days. And so when I arrived at FIT, I created all of these samples for all of the projects. I rewrote the curriculum for the entire first year, and I wasn't popular. I was popular with the students. The students loved me, and I loved the students, and we had a great time, but I don't think the faculty did. So the only reason that I would bring that up is that that's how the toy department came into being.
Right, I know.
So I went to the dean at that time, and I said, this is a little bit difficult for me, but and I had been offered a full-time position at Parsons, and I said, I don't quite know what to do. I said, I think that FIT is where I want to be because it offers everything to people that really can use it. But I said, I'm not really popular. I find I found the departmental meetings, which I had so looked forward to, as being horrible sessions that you could hardly wait to run out of. And so I was very quickly put onto different committees. And then when this project came in, it was offered to me. And then I just did that.
Okay. Now, the beginning of it the actual program launched in 89, but it began in 1986. Right, that's what I have in my notes. Can you tell me a little bit about what the circumstances were under which the department came about? Was there the industry came to you, or you went to the industry? How did it all?
The industry came to FIT, and they went to the Educational Foundation, which we no longer have as the Educational Foundation. And that was where you went if you had a project that you wanted to have students do. And there was a gentleman, his name was Arthur Price, who called the dean and said, I need someone to project direct this. I have Mattel Toys is here, and they want innovative product. And I was sent up as someone he could meet to be a project director. So, true to the way I worked in industry, the college was very generous, and they gave us over the winter, we worked on the project for a year. And over the winter, I had 4 teams, and each team was made up of different disciplines at FIT. And I brought in specialists from outside to consult and help, because no one knew what they were doing. And the college gave each of the teams a room to work in to create the product over the winter. And we did.
Wow.
And then we had a presentation to Mattel, and I think they were rather blown away. And so the conversation started. But before that happened, before we had our presentation to Mattel, I looked up in the yellow pages, those wonderful yellow pages that we had in those days, and I saw there was something called the Toy Manufacturers of America. And I called them up and I said, listen, I'm doing this very important project for Mattel, and I need all the information you have. I need to know about, child development. I need to know about advertising. I need to know about how you do your marketing. I need all of these, child safety, everything. I said, because we want to, develop some really fine product for you. So they said, oh, yes, sure, they would get back to me. And about a week later, they called and they said, yes, I could come and, look and use any of their files. And then I received a phone call from the president of the Toy Manufacturers of America asking for a meeting.
Whoa.
And I went over and he said, let's see how this project goes. And, one of the things that we're really interested in is developing a program to design children to do toys. And do you think FIT would be interested? And that was where the conversation started. And then the presentations went very well, and the TMA was there, and President Feldman was there, and
was it difficult in that first round to address fabrication? That must have been very difficult.
Well, I had a number of friends who, were architects, and I had contacts that I could bring in to work as consultants. And every project had an ideation book, similar to what I do now, which is really what you would do in industry anyway, to show the process. And I think they were so totally blown away. They'd never seen anything like that. I don't think they expected that. So fabricating could have been difficult, but everyone was very determined. And I actually have archives of the files. I mean, I have photographs of the product that was done. It was quite amazing and impressive.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did you develop the curriculum? I mean, it sounds like it was partnerships, but did you, based on what they needed, or how did it develop over?
The toy industry they were very clear that they wanted to have people trained to start in the industry as if they had worked in the industry for 2 years. I think they were very concerned with the fact that many of the people that they hired as designers, who were extremely talented, after 2 years were not right for toys. And they didn't really want to go through that 2-year training period. So we were told that people needed to be ready to jump in. So that was the premise, and that meant that only people who were really dedicated to children could come into this program. And that meant that we couldn't be an associate degree program, because we needed to be, at that time it was possible to develop just an upper division. And I did not want to work with 17-year-olds who didn't know what they wanted to do with their life and couldn't focus, because it was very clear that the curriculum was going to be quite intense. Because as we developed a basic outline, we had meetings here in the boardroom with presidents from companies, and with the TIA, and with different people from FIT, and we discussed the bare bones of the curriculum. And it was clear that we needed child development, and that we needed marketing, and that we needed a lot of drawing, and that we needed. And then it was a matter of how to weave all of this together. So it was very clear from the beginning that this was not an easy curriculum, that it's very multifaceted. I think of all the design curriculums, maybe that's no longer true, but it has so many different components, and all those pieces have to come together before you can really start designing a toy. So the decision was made it would be an upper division program. And then, in terms of developing the curriculum, I was not a toy maven, and so I asked, I had an advisory board that was made up of presidents of toy companies, and I asked for a consultant, and I was given by Hasbro this brilliant person, who was a mathematician actually, but he took care of all of their bringing in all the new technologies and working with inventors and all the blue sky product. And he was given to me as a partner. And I would go to his townhouse in Boston once every 2 weeks, and we would sit down and work on curriculum. And he would say, I would say to him, just tell me what it needs to have in it. Give me the ingredient list, and then I'll whatever. And then he would critique it, and that's how it happened. But in the beginning, truthfully, I didn't even know if we should do a toy program, because I didn't know what it was like for the designers in the industry, and I really do care about people, and so I said to the toy manufacturers, I need to see toy companies. And they were very, very generous. They were very determined to see this program happen. And they sent me to a number of major companies to see what it was like for the designers. I said, I really need to understand, and I need to understand so I know who is right for the program. There's no way, you can't just do these things in a box. You need to totally understand what you're getting into, or you better not get into it. And so I went to Mattel, I went to Hasbro, I went to Kenner. They sent me to a lot of companies, and I saw companies had different personalities, different focuses, But I could see that the designers were all really happy, and their offices were all full of toys, and I thought, oh, isn't that luscious? And in those days, they still put what you called black schmatas over product that wasn't out yet. So I would walk through, and the designers would have all these, there would be all these toys around, but there'd be all of these black things put over what they were working on, which was very funny. I don't know if that answered your question.
That was terrific.
Whatever.
This is great. I was actually going to ask you next, when you recruit, what are you looking for? I mean, how do you find the right person for the program?
You just know. You look for people who have obviously abilities, who have good drawing ability. But you look for people who care about children, who have worked with children. You look for people who are still a child. You look for people who are brave. You don't really look for, you feel who they are. Because you can tell. And you can take in, you can accept someone who may not have the most extraordinary drawing, but you know that person is going to be a star, because they have so much of that inner child. I remember taking in someone, his name was Terry Sear, and he was from Maine, and he was an engineer. And he had worked at Hasbro, and he was sick of doing engineering. And in those days, we had a restaurant across the street, and I took several people out to lunch, and we sat and we talked about life. And I just listened to him, and I said to myself, I'm accepting him. I just know that he can do this. And he was terrified because he didn't have the art skills that some of the other people had. Well, he's now a senior VP at a very special company that does all kinds of outdoor toys, that produces bicycles that go up to $3,000, from very low end to all the way up. And he has a product that he's been working on for 2 years that's up for a toady.
Oh, wow.
It's an amazing horse that's animated, that actually moves, and that the child rides. And he's so excited about it. And I saw him just about a week ago. He came in to visit. They live in Wisconsin. And he looked exactly the same. Exactly the same as he did. And it was interesting because he brought his wife. He wanted me to meet his wife, and he now has 2 little boys. And he said, if you hadn't taken a chance on me, I'd still be in Maine doing pipe work.
Wow.
And now he's very, very successful. He worked for a company. I placed him in a company called Wild Planet, which was for many years one of the most really exciting companies in the toy industry. They tried a lot of new product, and he worked there, and then he worked at Spin Master, and then he started in this company. So it's things like that that make you, or that show me that this department is now a wheel, and that it's working.
A wheel that, mean?
Meaning that everything that we do and give to them, to the students, they go out and they give back to children, and they give back to other alumni who are coming out, and they stay in contact with me. And it's like this perfect flow like this. It's kind of amazing. So I had some of my alumni gave me a surprise birthday party this year. And one of them said to me, and they were talking about how the company that they're working in now, they have 2 amazing mentors. And those mentors are people who are alumni. And I went home afterwards and I thought, you know what? It is really working, because they take care of each other. They're very motivated. They love what they're doing. They take care and support each other. And it's really special. We're very lucky.
So what you've communicated to them is not how to make product, but a certain set of values, it sounds like. How now the program launched in 1989, correct? How has the industry changed over time?
Radically.
Right.
It's changed radically. It used to be that there was a lot of independent product, and then this country went through a period of time where everyone was very, very nervous about money, and licensing came in. And what better for a toy company than to do product for a movie and not have to pay for advertising? And the world of licensing was born, not just in toys, but in every area. And for those of us in the industry, we would say maybe another 10 years and then it'll go back. But it never did. So now we live in a world of licensed product. And the smaller companies, the specialty companies, are the really interesting companies in many ways, some of them, because they're still producing independent product. So it has changed. And it's changed because technologies have changed. And any technology that's out there, regardless of what it costs, eventually it comes down in price and it goes into a toy. And you really, the technology needs to be invisible. You should not be aware that it's there. It should be in the background, taking care of what it's supposed to do, opening doors, non-lateral thinking, whatever you want to talk about, but it should not be blatant. So it's changed a lot. And so I think it's even more important that people come out of this program with a really good sense of values and understanding that they're there for people, because the world needs people who are strong enough to make decisions and do the things that need to be done, so that we have all of these new wonderful environmental things happening. And so you need to have a really strong set of values, and that is at the heart of the department. I think that's the very heart.
You have talked really passionately in other venues about play and how important play is. Talk about that. Tell me about how do you make a toy that is the perfect sort of, what's the word, that triggers, if you will. That's a terrible word. I hate that word. But a toy that kind of engineers play or brings play to a child. Maybe that's the wrong question. I hope you understand the spirit of it, not the literal.
I think there's certain things that are important to know. One actually is very interesting. There was a white paper that just came out from the Pediatricians Society talking about the fact that they would like pediatricians to give out prescriptions for play. That unfortunately play has, taken a back whatever, because everyone's so busy scheduling their child to go for this, to go for that, to do this, to do that, so they can get into college, that there's not the same kind of free play that we used to have. You don't see children out on the street with chalk talking to another child with chalk. You don't see the things that we had many years ago, and those were very important. So one needs to really look at how are you going to allow that child, how are you going to entice them and allow them to enter into their own world, not just the world of whatever the license is. How are they going into their world? How are they going to invite their friends in? Play is how people learn to be human. I mean, we are human, but play is how we learn to treasure the fact that we are and to respect that and to see that as something that's worthwhile. And I think, unfortunately, because of the way society is now, and maybe certain neighborhoods aren't safe, people don't play out on the street. I mean, in the old days, you know, kids would get on their bicycle and they would go out for the day and they'd come back at 9 and everything was fine. Now you'd have an Amber Alert. You'd have a, oh my God, my child is gone. So there's not that freedom. There's not that freedom that there was. So I think toys are essential and play is essential. I think one of the categories that's actually become very, very strong are family games, because many people realize that you need to have community, you need to have communication, not just pushing buttons, and so family games has become very, very popular again. I mean, it always was in the beginning, but once again, it's become very popular because it really brings people together and it's social, and you can actually look at someone and talk to them and not be pushing a button on your iPad.
Well, that's a really positive development.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
No, it is a very positive.
That's great. So, let's see, actually, I was going to ask you, and this is really a little off the beaten path a little bit, but how the college itself has changed over time also. Have you seen big changes in terms of, obviously, the structure of change, the way things are taught has changed, the departments have changed?
Well, the college is growing with the times, and doing all the things. President Brown is putting in place all the things that are necessary. But I think the difference that I see, because I've been here a long time,
right,
is that it was at one time a family. And now we have, because we have to, I mean, that's just the nature of the world, we've become very corporate. And I don't think that you can create something and have something this large that's doing what it's doing without that kind of a structure. So I totally understand, and I respect it.
Get it. I get it. So I was going to ask, I wonder if this is going to go back to the values question, but I was going to say, why don't we do it this way around, actually? Why don't you, the alumni, you mentioned one alum, and I just wondered if there were, alumni from your program have really reached the top of positions in almost all the toy design firms. Can we talk about a few of them? Not that they're your favorites, but just some that are memorable.
It's really interesting because we have so many senior VPs in so many companies making all of these decisions. And in NBC Universal, I see that, let me see I have to look at the name to see what the title is. Dave Voss is now the Senior Vice President of NBC Universal. And underneath him, who graduated 4 years after him, is the Vice President of International Product Development. And underneath him, who graduated, is PJ Pahio, who graduated in the same year, is the Vice President of Product Design Development for NBC Universal. And then there are two people under them that are also alumni. But that's the way it goes. I think one of my favorite alumni is Brian Wilk, who is a senior VP at Hasbro. And is amazing. He had gone to an art college in Maine, and then he came here because he was in love with Star Wars. And he got hired at Hasbro. He interned at Hasbro in Star Wars. He got hired at Hasbro. And he eventually became the VP of Boys. And Brian is really one of these wonderful people that knows how to work with people.
Mm-hmm.
And so every time there's an area in that company that needs some tweaking, he's put in charge of that. So he's now the senior VP of games and preschool. And I think it's exciting to see that people who, he's such a human being. He really cares. He really cares about product. He cares about people. And these are the people that are now at the top in the industry, and that's very special. I think many people from that first class was tiny. It was really tiny. It was 13. And that was tiny. And Evelyn Viol became the senior VP of Barbie, and she was there for the transition of Barbie's form.
Wow.
When Barbie changed her shapes and colors and whatever. And she's now like the general manager of Moose Mountain, which is this incredibly successful company in Australia. And under her, she brought Peter Hellenic, who worked with her at Mattel. It's just fascinating because you see, you just see how these little communities of FIT people are building in these companies. It's the same thing at Lego. Eric Gurnis he was an industrial designer living in Sweden, and his dream was to work for Lego. So he came here, and they hired him immediately, and he's now the head of their design. And he has under him several other people that are from here. And it's just very, it's humbling, and it's also, it's reassuring. Because I know what the makeup is of those people, and that makes me feel good. That really does make me feel good.
I understand completely. My next question maybe feeds on this, which again I think goes back to these values. I was going to ask if you had a sense of what you thought the overall influence of the program has been on the field.
I think it's been huge. Which is why the Toy Manufacturers of America became the Toy Industry Association, and it's now the Toy Association. But they have been our partners and our supporters from the very beginning. In the beginning, when we developed this program, and they partnered with us, their chairman actually used to come to our monthly departmental meetings, and we would go from like 6 to 12 and review the product of every student in the program, and we still do that. But we would have those meetings in the boardroom, and we would have them catered because he was there. But they have always been very dear partners, and I think they see the enormous value in having this lifeline, as they see it, into the industry. And our designers work in so many different facets and have they have a lot of input. And they're in important positions, and they have most of them, I think, have really maintained the values that they had to begin with and that they maybe developed in here. And I think this program is known for that. We're known for the ability that we could, sit in a meeting and draw anything out for anyone. And we're known for the fact that we care. We care about safety, we care about humanity, we care about community. We're very focused on people. And so that's what's expected of an FIT designer. And so I think, yes, we have had an enormous impact, and we probably have at least 18 senior VPs at this point in different companies.
That's amazing. And the students, I don't think we touched on this, but the students do work with children and get to watch them.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The first year of the program, I didn't have that. And I said, oh my God, this is not a good thing. And so I looked in the Yellow Pages and found Cardinal Spellman on the Lower East Side and went down there and said, can we have an internship? And I didn't tell anybody in the college. I didn't tell anyone. I was afraid they were going to tell me you can't do an internship, or it's not an. I didn't know what they were going to say. So we still have that. So once a week in their second semester, they go and they work. They intern in an early childhood development, and then we also have a relationship with Mott Haven, in which we have the second graders. Their second graders come down to us, and we do storytelling, and we pair our designers with their scholars, and they write stories, and we send them home on the bus with all these art supplies and their little book, and we do as much as we can with kids. Yeah,
that's great. Now, you were inducted into the Toy Industry Hall of Fame.
I was.
In 2013. Do you remember when you found out that was happening?
Yes, actually I do, because we had, we had invited, that's a funny question. We had invited Alan Hassenfeld, who was was the owner of Hasbro, to come in and give us a talk to our students, which he did for a number of years. And when he came in, we would always be sitting in the play space on the floor at his feet, because he was really our guru. And he's talking away, and he's talking to the students about this very important Hall of Fame, and that the toy industry maintains. And then all of a sudden, 3 people from the TIA came in, and they said, we're going to announce who's going to be who the nomination for this year. And I got this weird feeling. I thought I was going to throw up, actually. And they said that they wanted the announcement to be made in the classroom with the students at FIT. And they announced it, and I cried. I didn't really know what to say. I was so overwhelmed. But it was really important, because we're really the first educational unit that was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And I think that really shows the industry's respect and admiration for this program, and for all that it has given back to children. And that's why I was inducted. It was kind of an overwhelming event.
I can understand. What would you like for people to remember about you at FIT?
That I created something that has a life of its own, that has a family, a toy family of over 430 alumni who will take care of each other no matter what.
Are there any questions that I didn't ask that you wish I had?
Probably all of them.
Oh, okay.
No, you ask wonderful questions.
Okay.
You ask wonderful questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I think that's what I would like remembered, is that we created a family. And the one thing I will say, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. That's fine.
When we were 25, we had a party at the Rubin Museum, and President Brown and Pete Scotese were there. And if you know the Rubin Museum, you know the staircase that goes up. So we were way up here on the staircase going to give our presentations, looking down at all of these people. And I said to them, "Your family, and you take care of each other." And they do. But there they were. The night wasn't about me. You know, all these people were being very nice and saying nice things. And I said, this night is really about you. It's about the fact that you have this body. And I said, you should turn around and look at each other and realize what you have. And I know that after that evening was over, they all went out, different years together. They all went out and, had too much to drink and partied and whatever. But I think that's something that's not so easy to find. Lifetime friendships.
Yeah.
Yeah.